A report that was released or handed over to the president, who then released it to the public for consumption by the public. And there are quite a bit of recommendations there. We'll be getting into the details as to what level of education they affect. But let me start with you, Dr. Manyasa. What do you take home? Well, you're in studio, but what do you take home from this report, especially when you look at what is being proposed, renaming of junior secondary to junior school, senior secondary to senior school, but also the transitions in terms of what sort of assessments will be taken?
I know so many people who are in the task force personally. Many of them are my friends. I respect them a lot. I will continue to respect them, but I'm disappointed in what has come from them. I think they spend so much time doing a lot of things that didn't need to be done and failing to do the core things that needed to be done. I am saying this because we submitted a memorandum to them, and I know a few other memoranda that were submitted to them and what they talked about. If you look at the CBC framework, it envisages a primary school, it envisages a junior school, it envisages a senior school. And there were reasons. We could still have changed the curriculum without changing the system. But at the point of discussion, it was agreed that we should have a transition at age 12, because there was research to show that a lot of children were dropping out of school at that age. In communities where boys go into circumcision and they feel they have overgrown, we needed a transition to another level. That is how the system was changed. We could just have changed the curriculum without changing the system. These guys have recommended a school called comprehensive school. And let me tell you something that is interesting here. They say the comprehensive school will have ECD, primary, junior secondary, and it will be run by a principal. And then the principal will have 3 deputies, one for junior, one for primary, and one for ECD. They also go ahead and say ECD teachers to be hired by counties. So you are telling me the deputy principal for the comprehensive school in charge of ECD will be hired by counties and then report to the principal hired by TSC. Those reporting lines become complicated. Actually, one of the biggest challenges that we've been having in the public ECDs is that the teachers in the ECDs have had no reporting line. And most of the time, the head teacher of the primary school will just see the kids in the ECD playing around and discover that the teacher in charge didn't come to school because there was no reporting line. We suggested to them, be bold. And they had been telling us they are being very bold. Be bold and say, let us go to the Constitution and devolve infrastructure to counties. If you are in Loyangalani and your roof is blown off, writing to Jogo House to repair your roof is much harder than going to the governor there, because the MCA will be interested, they will go to the governor. They didn't do that. We asked them to look at all teachers being hired by TSC and managed by TSC, including ECD teachers, for standards. Because truth is, if you went around the country, every county has had its own caliber of ECD teachers.
Right.
There is no standardization. And we thought that they would say that, and they didn't do that. We asked them to be bold and recommend changes to the Basic Education Act that will give the parent a reasonable role to play in school. Today we talk about CBC as giving parents the role. CBC is making parents learn alongside their children. It's not giving them a role in schools. And traditionally, communities set up these schools. They set them up, they carry stones on their heads to build the first classroom. When it is taken over by the ministry, they are told, don't even enter through the gate. And we thought we would see changes, recommendations of changes to the Basic Education Act that gives the parent roles beyond the 2 that are assigned, which is fundraising and discipline. So you are only called to school because your child has a discipline issue or the school wants money. We haven't seen that. They are recommending abolition of the National Education Board and saying it is moribund. And I don't understand how that national structure will be moribund, and you tell us the county structure remains relevant and should be chaired by the county commissioner. County commissioners will keep moving. There was a friend of mine, county commissioner in my home county, who was moved around within 5 months to 3 different counties. How do they chair the education board in a county? So I think that the things they have recommended, for me, most of them not helpful.
And when you look at the level of assessment, because there was a very big conversation about the Kenya primary schools education assessment for grade 6, is it last year or thereabouts? Yes.
Yeah.
And now they're proposing that assessment to be a cumulative score from grade 4 to 6. Yeah. But when you get to an assessment for grade 9, those are the ones that are transitioning from junior school to senior school, then the KPSEA will form part of 20%. What does this mean?
Absolutely means nothing and can't actually be sustained. KPSEA was meant to be a transition exam. When it was agreed that junior secondary will be in the same primary schools, that transition was removed. We don't need that. Why? Because there is still a big problem. We haven't even trained teachers in assessment. If you go across the country, teachers will tell you they are struggling. And I know why. Because the day CBC was being launched, having trained teachers for 4 years, the assessment framework wasn't ready. I was part of the team that was working on the assessment framework. It wasn't ready. So what had we trained teachers on? When the assessment is part of teaching and learning, we had been training them on how to teach without assessment. So teachers are still struggling with the assessment as envisaged under CBC. We want to use that grade to place children into senior school. Children are supposed to be placed into senior school based on the conversation about career path and talent identification that is supposed to happen in junior school, which is why I have a big problem that right now we have deployed intern teachers to junior school. Junior school should have experienced teachers. It's very critical for this curriculum.
Okay. The PS is here. I know you don't head the basic education department, but you're still within the ministry. How do you resolve some of these concerns? Because it is okay to come up with a report and recommend this is what needs to be done, but implementing and also appreciating what is going on in practical sense is not always easy. So how do you move ahead to implement the report, yes, but also acknowledge and appreciate the challenges that exist, which may not necessarily be based on lack of a report?
Some challenges will always be there at all levels of what we do and where we are. So we have the different levels of education that we are dealing with the challenges therein. And it does not mean that we shouldn't come up with ways and means and trials of addressing the challenges that we may be having across the board, in as much as what is envisaged to have been there could be quite different from what is there. So we appreciate that, yes, challenges could be there, but that does not mean we should not progressively work very hard to address whatever challenges there might be, or give up on an envisaged future for our education just because there are challenges, or we have not yet gotten to where we would want to do what we may want to do. So the recommendations that my colleague is talking about, we cannot just sweep them under the carpet because we do not agree with them. But whatever recommendations have come up with the presidential working paper on education reforms should be sieved. We move with what is good about our education, reforming our education, and as much as possible, progressively look at what must continue to be done to ensure that eventually we get there.
Do you know what how the implementation matrix looks like? Like what takes effect immediately, what requires legislation or any other measures that may be required?
all those, some are there in the recommendations. And like our Excellency, the President said while we were releasing the document, some of them were already being undertaken. Others, legislation and policies are going on to ensure that we do them in the correct way as we continue to study and see what might go on. So this is already work in progress. There is what we are still legislating, and there is what is going to be undertaken after this. So this is work in progress and has already started, as His Excellency stated.
Okay. Charles, ordinarily, what would it take to implement some of these recommendations, and specifically on what is being proposed, including the renaming of the institutions from junior secondary school to junior school, but also entrenching how the assessment will be done? Is this enough, or is there supposed to be something taken to Parliament for approval?
Yeah, so when you look at the implementation metrics, it has an impact, first of all, timelines, and those are very clear if you look at that table. There are some running even up to 5 years. There are some quick wins which are going for 6 months. Then it says which are the impacted areas. Is it policy? Just like the PS is saying, there are some that actually call for policy, and there are some that call for legal frameworks to be changed. When I look at my own, for example, recommendation for Higher Education Loans Board, those mergers, there is a major impact on policy. In fact, in the report, you will find that an Appendix 4, you will find even the proposal of the legal framework that has already been recommended, and that has been given timelines. Now, you must have seen some in the release. In attendance were the two houses of Parliament, both the Senate and also the National Assembly. Those are part and parcel of supporting the process so that we can then quicken, or within the timelines that have been allowed, to be able to facilitate it. Remember, there will be heavy public participation again when those changes are actually happening. So even like Manyasa is saying, some of the areas that he feels actually disappointed, or the public feels disappointed, when the legal frameworks and the policy notes come out, what will happen is that people who feel like there are areas that require changes then need to be changed. Remember, in his closing remarks, His Excellency the President said his deputy is the one who will lead this process, and then the presidents will oversight this process going through. And the Working Party has also recommended or proposed that the implementation oversight team can actually be picked from some of the members from the Working Party. That we then will see the thought process, the vision carriers of these changes that have happened in education sector, then come through as they thought, through them, given the input that is also coming from the public.
Okay, interesting. For you, Dr. Wahome, again, looking at that implementation that some 6 months, some 1 year, some more than that, what is this that Kenyans must be aware of as we transition? Because that CBC program, in about 2 years from now, there will be transition to the senior school. What is that must be done so that by that time, because there's that conversation that also the senior schools will transition from the current categorization to being pathways, what is that has to happen?
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially from where I sit, is a very robust career guidance. When we are now talking of the pathways, with the current system, by the time the student is ready to go for higher education, that's either the diploma or university, there are a mix of both sciences and humanities. But now in this system, they need to identify their strengths, their talents way in advance, and then take a pathway that, if you're taking humanities, then you're taking humanities from earlier on before you exit secondary school. So there's a need for very clear way of assessment, how the students will be assessed in these classes, and then also very clear career guidance on as they take these pathways.
Right.
For the institutions of higher learning, this is the colleges and universities, they also need to start preparing their curriculum to be able to receive these students. looking at the mode of assessment and even the training where we are talking of more skills, focusing on more skills rather than recall, then they also need to be able to prepare the same way and do away with the yellow notes, per se. Yeah.
Okay, and what would that take? Because, look, currently majority of, is it called the faculties in different universities, they have been doing what they've been doing for such a long time. So who is this to come up with the CBC version of the degrees?
I think in TVET, when we are talking about the CBET programs, and PS can talk about this, TVET is already in that form of assessment. So there's a lot to learn from the TVET sector on how to do it, how to assess the students. Okay. And they've been encouraging the TVETs now to even get them assessed in different ways rather than the NEC, the way NEC has been doing it. So for the universities, I know the Senate have to, it has to start at department level as they develop their course outlines, then take them to Senate. And I'm sure our PS, Higher Education and Research, that is an area that she has taken on to engage the universities seriously.
PS, help us here, because is it about the course outline or is it the mode of delivery, but also what changes at that level? Because at the university you're no longer a child. What changes when it's CBC?
As you transition all the way to the university, the levels of preparedness have to be present as well. Like Mercy has said, already at the TVET level, we are recrafting the curricula so that we are training our students on the skills. So that we have broken down the big names of the certificates, the diplomas, so that we train you on skills right from what we call the micro level, the medium level, and to the full level. So we are breaking up the curricula so that we train you on the particularized areas where you have to be skilled. So that as you come from the lower level, the CBC level, then you are ready to transition to a level which has already been competency-based arranged. Because CBC, we are talking about competency-based curricula. So this is also what we are doing at the TVET level. We are recrafting the curricula to CBET, competency-based education and training, so that as you come in, now you can come and fit in. And this is what has to move on to the university level. Actually, before I came to this place, I was at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, and we had already started going through this thinking, where we were challenging each other at Senate level to be able to get ready for the graduates of CBC when they eventually come to the university. And therefore, the preparedness at that level also, from the department level to all the way to Senate, was already going on even at the time. And I am sure that is still going on, where the various curricula is being transformed so as to fit in with the oncoming CBC.
Who's training? Who's training these people?
A lot was being done even from the international level. I remember one doctor, I'm forgetting his name now. He was very active in speaking to some lecturers, to some professors in Spain, who were already in this space before us. So we used to have online meetings where we would talk to them about how they have been doing this, so that we can bring it down to our country.
The reason I'm asking that, PS, is because
Yes.
once upon a time, when CBC was being piloted and eventually being rolled out at the primary level, there are a lot of noise from the teaching fraternity that the training is not adequate. They were doing it during the holidays, just a few weeks. If you have, allow me to call it a faculty of 6,500, how will you train these 6,500 TVET trainers to be CBC compliant, while at the same time you're changing the curriculum and the mode of delivery?
Like I said earlier on, the change of the curricula is happening at the departmental level, because this does not mean that the competency-based education and the training is starting right now. What had happened is that it was not very active. So we still had some people who were already on the ground, and they have had the knowledge of how this can be done. What we are actually doing is upscaling this to now the level where we must be absolute in skilling our trainees, and also in preparedness for the upcoming CBC. So it doesn't mean that there was a vacuum. That is number one. The vacuum was absolute. We already had some people who actually with this knowledge. Number two, we have lots of working partners with us. For example, we are working with Canadians and Germans. Those two are very good with this level of training, where their training to a very large extent has been college and industries. Okay, so we are working with the German GIZ, who are helping us in this at this level, and the Canadian CICAN, who are also helping us to recraft our trainers as well as recraft the curricula.
Okay.
So we have working partners on the ground,
right,
who are already way ahead of Kenya, way ahead of us, as far as some of these spaces are concerned.
Dr. Manyasa, so transition from national schools, extra-county, county schools, sub-county into pathways, and 60% of these institutions are expected to offer STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. How must we do this, knowing well about our capacity across the country, especially for sub-county schools?
Thank you, Sam. As we speak, I have photos of some of the schools we have in this country on my phone, because we've been carrying out a national survey on secondary schools. And I can't display them, because some of the schools, if you looked at them, you'll be very frustrated that they are called secondary schools, and they're in this country. So we have to start to ask ourselves, what are these schools where we are going to take our children when they move to senior? And we have 2 years exactly to be moving to senior. We have 2 years to have determined which schools are going to offer sports, science, and it is not renaming, it is facilitating those schools, creating the facilities and providing the manpower needed in those schools for them to become that. My opinion was that some of the schools, some of the TVET institutions would actually become technical schools for the technical pathway, because they already have significant amount of resources invested in providing the facilities needed for that pathway. I have listened before to some government officials saying we will have 30% go to this stream and 30%. How have we determined that? Because our commitment is that CBC will give every child an opportunity to pursue their strength. So when did we do the assessment to know what percentages will go into which stream? We haven't done that. We don't know, unless we're going to force certain children into some streams that they may not necessarily coincide with their strength. We need to work on our... We have managed to muddle around with the junior school because we failed to prepare for it, stumbled into it, and somehow we are surviving. even when there is very little learning going on in public junior schools. And I'm saying this without a shadow of doubt, because I know a school with 120 learners with the 2 CRE and Kiswahili teachers. They were sent 2 teachers, both of them CRE Kiswahili. If you go to most, you're frowning, that is the truth. TSC did the recruitment of those teachers in the most haphazard way that one could do something. So you find English literature, 2 teachers in the same school, no teacher for science. They did not balance the distribution of the teachers, but we are muddling through. We can't do the same with senior school. Yeah? Because it is clear pathways, it is careers for children and for the future of the country. Yet 2 years into that, to that deadline, there's no visible preparation. I was expecting today, when the task force released the report, we recommended to them abolishing of this story of national, county, sub-county. We put that in our memorandum, because we thought for a very long time, for the last 10 years, government has been giving national schools 300 million every year for upgrading. Schools that are very well endowed, against sub-county schools that some don't even have the head teacher's office. And I have photos from schools that I can name, and if that wasn't unethical. But we are moving into a system where, as early as now, we needed to have categorized schools. To have said, if we are going to make a Lion the STEM school, what resources does it already have? How many learners are we expecting will go there? What resources does it need additional? If we are going to make Pangani Girls here, a talent academy, what resources does it need to become that? We should be on that path now. Unfortunately, we are not. And we are playing with a very dicey game, because we have gambled with the junior school, we can't gamble with senior school.
This is going to be capital intensive, PS, or is it not?
It is.
So knowing that education is taking, the figure is 628 billion shillings, which is, what percentage is that out of 3.6?
30%.
30% of our resources. So this will require more. Or will you get the money?
Thank you, Sam. But before I answer that, where we're going to get the money from, let me also tell my colleague that we have children in school. We agree it's not been rosy all through, but we have children already in school, but we also have changes to make. And those changes, we were not going to make them in a vacuum.
Okay.
We are going to make those changes as we still try the best we can for our children. So what my colleague could be referring to as modeling and all that is that we already have the kids with us, and we could not remove the kids from school.
They were not born yesterday.
Put them somewhere in water, and then do the changes, and then return them. So we will make changes where we are still having our children, and therefore some people may see this as muddling or as making mistakes, but we have our children already present with us. Changes must be made, and changes have to be made through this space. And that might be seen as...
Fair point, PS, but I think he's raising an important question, and I'll get back to the other panelists.
Yes.
That you introduced junior secondary school, as the name is now, and you sent 1 teacher or 2 teachers, yet there are 14 learning areas, and their qualification is CRE and Kiswahili, his example. How does that work?
We will still do our best with the situation, because like I've said, the children are already there, all right? And the changes have been made. So even what is calling 1 Kiswahili teacher and 1 physical teacher, well, I don't know. I haven't experienced that myself. Probably it could be true, but we are saying, I don't think this is being done, out of ignorance or out of no concern, but it is situations which we must deal with even as the best we can do out of the situation. Anyway, you also asked me the question of money. Where are we going to get more money from? Some we are going to work with our working partners, which we already have been doing, who have been and are going to continue supporting us in this space, and like the school feeding program, which is now very, very robust. We are leveraging on a lot of working partners who we are going to work with to be able to make many of these. Even on the TVET space, we have lots of working partners who we have been speaking to and who have helped to us in as far as covering some of these spaces concerned.
Dr. Ahome, does it bother you? Because at the end of the junior school, I'm torn between the transition, junior secondary school to junior school rather. At the end of these 3 years, they're supposed to go to either STEM school or to a social science school or to an art and sports science. But in their first year, the junior secondary school, they're being taught by a CRE teacher in Kiswahili. How will they ever get to 60% of STEM?
Sam, I think, when we choose to see negative things and, just have a negative narrative, we are blind to see what the government is doing. Remember, the government has employed 56,000 teachers. This government actually committed to employ 110,000 teachers. We are already halfway, even with the difficult economic situation that we are experiencing as a country and the world. We can afford to employ 56,000 teachers because of the importance the government has put on education. In the report, there is also an aspect of having those who train to be teachers going through a 1-year internship program. That also helps in bridging that gap of the shortage of teachers. There is also a review on the requirements for those who are getting into the teaching profession. We know that for primary teacher, our government institutions have been lying without any teachers being trained because of the requirements that we had put in as a minimum criteria to be trained as a primary school teacher. We had a grade of C and C in 5 subjects. The report has recommended that we have it as just a C, a mean grade of C to go in for diploma primary. That is one of the recommendations that we have already started, implementing.
Right.
And I can tell you, last year we had less than 2,000 people expressing interest to be primary school teachers, not because they were not interested, but because of this punitive criteria.
Right.
Our system is currently open for primary teacher application. And as we speak, by this morning, we had 22,000 applicants. So I see, both...
So there'll be teachers in how many years from now?
There'll be teachers in 3 years from now.
3 years.
But you can see we are already bridging the gap with the employment, because in 2 years, we'll have at least 110,000 teachers employed. So there is a deliberate effort to close that gap and take care of, one, the population of children that is rising by about 100,000 every year, and then the specialization of these teachers into the different pathways.
Right.
There's already training of the ones who are already in service. So I think, Sam, if we can be honest with ourselves, if there's a ministry that is really committed, is the Ministry of Education.
All right. I want us to transition. Is it so burning?
Yeah, it's just something small on the issue of money. Kenya has put enough money in education. The problem in education is that a lot of that money is being mismanaged. And I'll be very plain. TSA had no reason to hire 2 CRE teachers for the same school. No reason. There were no shortages of science teachers who are trained. They could hire 1 science, 1 arts teacher. That is mismanagement. One of the things I was so much expecting from this task force report was to make it mandatory for TSC to ensure equitable distribution of teachers. They have not recommended changes to the TSC Act to that effect. In fact, they're just making delete this and that. But if you look at the TSC Act, the requirement on TSC that when you set up a new school, it gives you the principal. Once they give you the principal, what you do with the school is your business. They have fulfilled the requirements of the TSC Act. That is the obligation, to give you a principal. Mm-hmm. We had asked them to make it mandatory for TSC to ensure equitable distribution of teachers across the schools. Because we have schools in this country with no teachers, most of them schools that educate children of the poor, mm-hmm. and very well endowed schools with more teachers than they need. Because TSC, we one time spoke to senior people in TSC and they told us, it is you men who are marrying teachers in Nairobi and refusing to have them transferred. You say, we are breaking your families. So TSC has no powers to force teachers to go to certain parts of the country. And that is a major problem because of the inequity that comes from that. We expect it to see change.
All right, I want us to transition to one